Welcome to the Build with Boundaries podcast. My name is Manaz, and this podcast is for mums who want to carve out time so that you can work in ways that work for you, your life, your family, and of course your business. Together, we will discover why you are not prioritising your business and the actions that you can take so you can live an intentional, productive, and fulfilled life without mum guilt. So let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome to today's episode. I'm excited to have Donna Eade on with me today. We're talking about all things podcasting. So welcome, Donna. Do tell the listeners who you are and how you help your clients.
I'm Donna. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. I am a podcast host and mentor. I also help people with editing and publishing their own podcasts as well. I'm just basically anything podcasting. I love audio, so I have been called the Queen of Podcasting by some of my peers. It's not a self-titled title, but I'll take it. I help my clients by helping them create their podcast from the beginning, from the idea stage right through to publishing, and obviously I can help with the post stuff as well, but I do that mainly through my group program called Start Your Podcast. It's a 6-week program where we walk through from the ideas to creating scripts to recording, editing, how we publish, show notes, all of the stuff that you can do afterwards with repurposing. And I go through all of that with them, and I do it in small cohorts, so there's never not enough time for you. I found that a lot of the courses and things that I did, I felt lost and like I didn't really have a voice in there, and I'm all about people finding their voice. So I like to keep the group small so that you can get the personal touch that you need and the help that you need in regard to you and your podcast, because I believe everybody is unique.
Absolutely perfect. That sounds great, especially for not knowing, you're dealing with everything. There's so many different aspects to podcasting. So tell me then, tell us a little bit about your story and how you discovered this is the thing that you want to do, because you're so passionate about podcasting. Obviously you've got your own podcast as well. Yeah. Mindset and Action podcast. So how did you think, you wanted to be a mentor for podcasters?
So podcasting has been around for a very long time, longer than you probably expect, but obviously it started in America, like a lot of good things do, and I started listening to Amy Porterfield when she was on episode 40. She's now on episode 600 and something. So that's how long I've been listening. And I always thought that it was something that was only for Americans, that you would have to have a fancy studio, a fancy setup, something, really like a radio station to be able to do a podcast. I had no idea how simple you can make it when it comes to the equipment setup. And so I just enjoyed listening, and I had previously been offered an opportunity with BBC Radio Northampton to do a show on a Sunday, an idea that they were percolating. It never came to fruition, but I loved the idea of being a radio presenter. And in 2020, I had started my business, and I was looking for my pillar content. We're all told that we need a piece of pillar content, a podcast, video or blog. And I was like, I did a blog when I was a wedding photographer, and I didn't really want to go down that route again. I just struggle. I have what I call keyboard dyslexia. I really need to look up and see if it is actually like a thing that exists out there. But for me, it really does. When I type, I am always getting my words mixed up. My letters are always back to front, and I just struggle. And sometimes they're back to front, but that makes a word, so it doesn't even come up as a spelling error. So the number of times people will say to me, do you realise that this mistake is on your website and stuff? And I'm like, I'm really sorry. Yeah, I'll go and fix it. Thank you for letting me know. So I was just like, I don't want to do the writing thing if I can help it. I didn't want to be camera ready all the time. And I was just like, how do you do this podcasting? Like, I'd seen so many more things coming up with podcasting that I was just like, there's got to be a way. So I sort of sat down, I did the research, and I got started. And I got started really quickly, and I didn't do a lot of the things that I should have done But I got it out there, I got it started, I fell in love with it. I absolutely love doing my podcast, and I love it when I hear people tell me, oh, I love your voice on your podcast, or oh, I really enjoyed that episode that you did. It just brings me so much joy, and I just love it as a tool for my business. So that's how I got into it. And yeah, it's had a few iterations. So if you scroll right back to like my beginning episodes, you will see that on my guest episodes there are different thumbnails, because I would change them for my guests. So when I change my main one, it doesn't change those ones. And so we started off as a Society of Professional Wedding Vendors podcast, which is what I did in 2020. And then as the business changed, I changed the podcast name to the Wedding Procast UK, because a lot of people thought that previously to that it was a members only podcast, and it wasn't. So I changed it to something that was more generic for the wedding industry. And then in April 2023, I had made the really sad decision in my mind to close the business that I had been running for the wedding industry, because it just wasn't gaining the traction I needed it to gain. And I was like, well, what do I do now? And I'd had people ask me about podcasting. I'd run a workshop already for podcasting, and I just thought, well, you know, teach what you know, and podcasting was it. So that's how I ended up being a podcast mentor.
Oh, exciting. It sounds like you fell in love with it, literally just getting going, and that's often the case, isn't it? We learn so much when we're actively doing the thing. And thinking about it, we can imagine that something will be enjoyable, but it's not until we do it that we can really understand. Yeah. You remind me, I don't think I've shared my story of when I started my podcast. I set it up in 2 hours, and I kind of just decided I was going to have it. I had a question for my coach, because I'd started doing some audios and I was just putting them on YouTube. And I asked my coach, what could I do with kind of my thing was that I'd collected these, and I was quite enjoying doing these audio episodes, a bit like a podcast. And I asked her, how could I repurpose it? And she's like, oh, you could literally have a podcast out in a couple of hours, you know, and this is what you do, this. So there I went away, 2:00, the meeting finished, and at 4:00 my kids came home, and I'm like, I'm on Spotify.
I love that.
And I had 10-15 episodes already, so I could just sort of upload them, and they were there. So yes, when you set your mind to doing something, you can totally do it. And I think for me anyway, it was always the try it out and see if you actually enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
And because I had recorded already a whole bulk of these audios, I knew it takes time, doesn't it? It's like trying to find your voice and what you want to say, and just be more comfortable, because it is a bit like talking out into the open ether.
Yeah, into the abyss.
You know, when you're recording it. Yes. Yeah. So that's great that your actual passion for doing it came kind of accidentally, just by enjoying other podcasts, giving you the idea of trying it out. I mean, it goes to show same thing can happen for anybody who's listening. They might have been thinking about podcasts for some time, and there's never really that push or drive to do it, because it doesn't feel like it's something that's necessary. But how do all your skills then come together in terms of your experience you've had? I'm sure working on other podcasts has been really helpful in how you're doing all the work that you're doing now to introduce podcasts in a simplified way, all the different aspects and doing all the things. But what is it that you bring then to your that's the skills and what people need to know at that stage?
So for me, I think the skills of podcasting really come down to providing a great audio experience for the listeners. To me, that's my big thing. And I think for me, my skills come from, I was a singer for a very, very long time. I think I came out of the womb talking, I'd say. I came out with a full vocabulary. Just ask my mum. She spent my whole life trying to shut me up. And and I've been a singer, so I've been in that world of music and loving that, and so that comes into it. And then just being around business owners really has given me a lot of insight into the world of marketing and the world of business. And for me, that's kind of where they come together. The being able to take the marketing aspect of business and this love of audio that I have, and bringing those skills together to create something that it's not just, you know, you put a podcast out there. There needs to be a purpose for it. What's your purpose behind the reason for the podcast? And when you've got that purpose and that reason, then you can take these skills and you can push that agenda and push it forward and have success with it. I think a lot of people come into podcasting with an idea of what it should do, and when that doesn't happen, they give up. And that really makes me sad, because it's taken me 3 years to get to where I am with my podcast. And when I decided to teach it, I didn't think that this was a get an audience quick scheme that you could use, and that's not what I promote, because it's not that. And I've evidenced that. But what it is a long tail marketing tool, and it has so much power to it if you can just keep it going, if you can fit it in, if you enjoy it. So I think if it's a slog to do it, then there's the issue. You know, some people, they enjoy the recording part, but they can't stand the editing. That's where I come in. I will do that editing for you. And there are other people that will do editing. You can get people on Fiverr and Upwork and things that do editing for, you know, reasonable costs. So there is that situation. But if you don't have a purpose and a reason to do it, then it's so easy to give up. And that's where I sort of come in to try and encourage and set you up for success with it, so that you don't give up.
Yeah. No, I love that, because like you said, bringing purpose and focus to what you do. And if you don't understand why you're doing it, then it's just never, you're just sort of spinning your wheels and doing an audio for the sake of it, but you don't really have a strategy, I guess, to back it up. So in terms of marketing your business, podcasting is a great way to, you know, get more visibility, get people to really get a sense of who you are and feel like what you're all about and things. So what would you say, does podcasting seem like it's a really good option compared with other marketing strategies?
Okay, so my biggest thing about podcasting is that it is a really intimate way of speaking to your audience. So imagine now your listeners are out there, and the likelihood is that the majority are listening on their mobile phones. 79% of people listen on their mobile devices. And what do we do when we've got our mobile phones on? We've usually got our earpods in, or, you know, your headphones on, because you're walking around doing stuff and you don't want to be, you know, like picking up your phone every 5 minutes and moving it to the new space. So you've got your headphones in so you can be hands-free. We're whispering in people's ears right now. Hi, guys. You know, that is really... How many strangers do you let within an arm's reach of you, let alone whisper in your ear? You know, there are like probably 2 people on this planet that could come and whisper in my ear. My partner and my daughter. Anybody else comes that close, I'm like, whoa, back off, dude. What are you doing? But, you know, as podcasters, we get to speak to people directly in their ears, which is just like so intimate. And also, this is the other reason why I'm really passionate about good audio, is because when you're that close to somebody and you're on a podcast, that's all they're getting. Of all of the senses that we've got, you're only using your auditory senses, which means that what you put in there has got to be good. And then what that does is it allows you to build your know, like and trust factor super quickly. And there's a study been done recently, actually beginning of this year, March, I think it was March or May, definitely began with an M, this year, where they, you know, surveyed a lot of podcast listeners, and the truth was revealed that 75% of podcast listeners are more influenced by a podcaster's recommendations and suggestions for purchases than they are TV celebrities, which came out at 10%, and influencers that came out at 15%. So podcast hosts have literally dethroned the original influencer in that way. So we have a lot of power in what we do as podcasters. If you can build that loyalty of that audience, they are way more likely to take a recommendation for you, because we've built up this connection with them, this really intimate connection. And you don't get that through a blog, you know, and you don't get it through a video either. I mean, video slightly more, because you can see somebody and you're hearing them, but again, people usually watch those on their phones. They're propping their phones up, or they're watching it on their laptop. They're not usually earpods in as much, and so it's not as intimate. And the other thing that I will say to that point is that when you have that kind of closeness with your audience, you are able to, you know, make those suggestions, give them the options, and have them see it from your point of view and understand it from your point of view. And because they have that closeness with you, they are going to be able to go, do you know what, actually, yeah, I understand why she's saying that, and can go and do those things. And it's just so powerful to have that influence. And I wrote recently, you know, with I think it was on one of my carousels, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. So, you know, don't abuse that, you know. Always speak with authenticity, always speak from truth when it comes to what you're recommending. Don't just recommend something because you're getting paid to recommend it. Don't just recommend something because you've got an affiliate link. I mean, I would have hoped that if you've got an affiliate link, it's because you really love the product or the service or the platform or whatever in the first place. But, you know, don't go, it's your reputation that's on the line when you're recommending things. So I think it's really important to be in your truth when you're doing that, and that's just going to build that loyalty with your audience, and that's just incredibly powerful for marketing your business, because when it comes to selling your own thing, people, they get to know you. And this is why I say it's long tail media, because it's got to be something that's built over time. Somebody's not going to listen to your podcast one day and then buy what you're selling. But if they've listened to 100 episodes and you're then saying, hey, I've got this fantastic thing, it's going to help you, how are they not going to trust that that is the case? Because they've got that history with you. So that's why I say, you know, don't give up after 3 episodes, because there's so much more to it.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I've seen so many stats around people just uploading their first podcast and then never really putting any more effort in, or not uploading another one.
90% give up at episode 3.
Is it 90 episode? 90%. Wow, that is such a... that was such a great conversation there, Donna. I loved how you said whispering in our ear, because that is so true. That is literally what we're doing. Yeah, I've never really thought about it like that. It is very intimate, and it is like building a relationship with somebody. It is about connection, and, you know, it's soft, it's gentle, it's it's on demand, you know, like when they want to listen, it's there for them, and they can go back and re-listen, and it's a different experience than video. And it's really fascinating you mentioning the ads, TV ads and celebrities. So that goes to show that drip feeding, this trust almost that's built up over time, is so much stronger than this one burst of an advert.
I mean, obviously,
maybe not one burst,
we've got to look at the audience numbers. So when you're going, you know, podcasters are more influential than celebrities. Yes. However, celebrities' audiences are like 100 times bigger than a podcaster's audience. So monetarily wise, I think the celebrities are still okay. But they're not going to start.
Yeah, of course.
But
but it just puts things in perspective, doesn't it? That, you know, it's all relative, and if, you know, you can do your marketing activities. Well, we're not going to put an advert on the television, so we can't, you know, that's not realistic for a small business owner. So what other things are they going to do, and how does that get them in front of people over and over again? podcasting is still really popular and more new podcasts are still coming out. I think it's not hit its peak yet, is that right?
Yeah, podcast is. I missed the stat. I read it the other day on how many podcasts are released sort of every week, and it's ridiculous the number that come out. But what makes me sad is to know that 90% of those are going to get to episode 3 and stop. And I always say that's because of one of 3 things: is that they haven't got a strong why, that purpose hasn't been clarified beforehand. They have no systems in place to actually, work out when are they going to fit it into their schedule, because everything is time, and we all have a finite amount of that, as you know, with talking about boundaries all the time. It's, there's only so many hours in the day, where are you going to fit it in? And then the other is that they don't have the right expectations of what a podcast is going to do for them. I've been doing a class this last week called the 5 Power Pillars of Podcasting, and that's showing people how else they can use podcasting whilst they're building this audience, because like I said, it's long tail media. You've got to do it over time. It comes over time. And what can you be doing with your podcast in that meantime? There is lots that you can use it for that is going to give you traction in your business. But when you look at people who finish at episode 3 and give up, it's usually because they're expecting to get thousands and thousands of downloads on their episodes, because that's what they think they need, because that's what you see on YouTube. You need 4,000 watch hours and 1,000 subscribers, and so you translate what you know to the things that you don't, and you just think, oh well, I need that for my podcast. Or you see how many hits people are getting on their blogs, and you hear the big numbers for blogs like Rock and Roll Bride and things like that, and you think, oh my god, I need all of these eyes on my podcast. And it's not like that. And when they only get a few I will be honest with you, my first month in podcasting, I got 34 downloads in total for 4 episodes. Now, part of that is to do with the fact that I didn't launch my podcast properly, and that's something that I really sort of urge people to do. You didn't do it properly, I didn't do it properly. We just kind of put it out there and got started. It makes such a difference when you actually have a launch strategy in place for your podcast. And I always say there's a big difference between starting from 0, trying to get to 100, and starting from 50 and trying to get to 100. So that's kind of why I sort of advocate for a good launch. Which I also evidenced with my relaunch of my podcast in April this year. I actually shared my stats somewhere in a class that I've done recently, where I gave my first 6-month stats versus my last 6-month stats, which actually fall in when I relaunched my podcast, and the difference that made is insane. So yeah, I think those are the 3 reasons why people tend to drop off after 3 episodes.
Yeah, okay, that's really interesting. So we've talked about the positives in terms of marketing, and when it comes practically to doing the podcast, what would be your favourite and your least favourite thing about podcasting?
For me, my favourite thing is interviewing people. I love doing my interviews. I really just enjoy getting to know different people from different places. Like I've interviewed people from Australia, from Canada, America, Ireland, all over the UK. So I really enjoyed doing that, and that's one of my favourite things. One of my least favourite things is writing show notes. For the reason I gave earlier, the reason I don't like writing blogs. I don't like doing the written side of things. But thankfully, my host actually has a AI co-host. I let that do it now. I just go in and adjust afterwards. So I've got rid of that. But if you sort of the things that I actually do, I have to say, as much as I'm quite happy to do other people's editing because I'm getting paid to do it, I don't like doing my own. I do get behind with it. It's one of those things that I kind of put off. And it doesn't even take me that long, so I don't know why. But I think it's because it's so focused. And I'm very much somebody who's like, I'm over here doing this, and then I'm over here, and I'm jumping from thing to thing. And when I'm doing my editing, I can only be doing that because I've got to be listening.
Yeah.
I can't read something while I'm listening to that, because otherwise I'm missing whether I've got to actually edit. So I've just got to be at 100% focused on it.
Yes.
And I kind of struggle with 100% focus on something.
Okay.
So sometimes editing is a bit of a problem for me, for my own editing. But other than that, I'm fine with it. I can do it quite quickly when I just sort of zone in.
It's getting over it, isn't it? It does feel a little bit tedious, especially if you have made a few
Mm.
mistakes and you've got to kind of keep editing little bits rather than just do the
I mean, I've got it used to take me a lot longer. And then I learned some new skills and I implement them and I teach them in my program to make it quicker to edit. And I do that. And so it does take me a lot less time. I think it's just getting started. Like once I'm started, I'm in the flow and I can get it done. But I don't know. I will go and procrastinate and do all other things.
Find something else.
Before I will actually open up Audacity to edit my podcast. And I don't know why. It's just this little block for me. But yeah, it takes me a lot less time now than it did like a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Practice.
Yeah, that
practice, isn't it? So what advice would you give to others who are maybe thinking that podcasting would be a great option for them, or it's something that maybe they've started but they're not quite being consistent, just like we talked about? That's probably going to be a lot of people as well who, what could they do? What advice could you give so that it can be a little bit more easier for them?
So if you haven't started yet, I would say make sure that you have your purpose written down, journal around it. What is it that you want to get out of a podcast? What are you going to expect it to do for your business? And then talk to some people that actually have podcasts and find out whether that is actually possible. Because if you go in there thinking that day one you're going to be able to have thousands of downloads and then all of a sudden you're going to sell out of your programs and, this is going to be the easiest thing in the world, you're going to have a rude awakening. Number 2, don't go buying all of the fancy stuff out of the gate thinking that you need to have all of this stuff, because you don't. I started with my Apple headphones, the microphone off of that, plugged into my laptop on a free audio recorder. And you can do that too. So you don't have to. And I sort of upgraded to my microphone, which is a basic mic as well. I upgraded to that microphone when I hit a certain milestone. I gave myself a milestone and I was just like, if I hit this milestone, I'll upgrade to a microphone. But I think do that, because at the end of the day, if you do start it and you realise actually this isn't for you, then you don't want to have wasted your money on equipment that you're not going to be using. So that would be my second thing. And then my third thing is make sure that you have a launch plan. Launch it like a product. Don't just put it out there and expect it to just bring in the people. It's not the way it works. That whole, build it and they will come. It doesn't work like that. So you've got to put the effort in. And like I said, if you can put the effort in and start at 50, it's a lot easier to get to 100 from there than if you start at 0. And I think I had like 10 downloads on my first episode. And now I have nearly sort of around 70 downloads a week on average. And then sometimes it's a lot more, sometimes it's less. So, those are stats that a lot of people will shy away from sharing. But it's having the right people. If the right people are coming back again and again and again to listen to you, and you're building on that every week, then you've got an audience of people who are there for the right reasons. You could have on YouTube, for example, they say that 50 to 60% retention on a video is good. So you've got 50, half of your people are sort of watching half of your video, and then you've got all of those people that are jumping off at 30 seconds. And they're people that aren't your people. You've got to wait for the people that are going to watch 100%. Those are your people. And that is a lot smaller fraction of people. For podcasting, 80% of people who press play on a podcast will listen to the entire episode. Oh. So that is so much different. That is an extra 30% on, 20 to 30% on what video retention rate is. And if you have hooked somebody in from the beginning and they've listened to the whole thing and then they come back and listen again, then you have got like a loyal listener there. You become a habit for them. You become part of their routine. You know, every Thursday on the school run, I listen to Donna and Mindset and Action, or, you know, every Monday whilst I'm at the gym, I listen to Manaz with her Boundaries podcast. It's like, that's how it sort of becomes part of their routine. And so make sure that you've got your purpose, that you don't go and fork out for loads of equipment that you don't necessarily need or want, and then just make sure that when you are going to launch, that you have a launch strategy in place and you launch it like you launch a product. So that's what I would say to people that haven't started. To people who have already started and are a little bit more sporadic, I would say look at batching your podcast. You know, it makes such a difference. And it's not even batching the whole thing, but I batch record episodes, and then, you know, if my editing takes me a bit longer, it's fine, but I know that I've got them all there, so that I have never got to go, oh my God, I haven't got a podcast to put out this week. Because it's always there. A month before I run out is when I record my next batch. So when I do run out, my next batch is already there to edit and go. So whether you batch the whole thing and you like take a week and do 10 episodes, and over that time you do all of the things you need to do to get it up and scheduled, is up to you. But make a system for it and put that system in place, and that is going to help you to stay consistent with your podcast.
Definitely, I love that advice. I love the stat you shared there, 80%. I was thinking, you know, as business owners, you might think, oh, that's like 20-30%. That's huge when you're not dealing with big volumes anyway. And it's not like, you know, most solopreneurs aren't looking for hundreds and hundreds of clients, are they? So equally, you know, that it's that impact. So yeah, really, really good advice there. And yeah, our tech is so much more advanced. You know, our mobile phones there's so many different ways you can record and you can get going. I think the important thing is to just go for it and try it out and see, and not get caught up in the I need this tech before I can get started, because that's a good way to procrastinate over a podcast for sure.
I think a lot of people get caught up on the tech thing and sort of fear it, and that's why I take my time with it. In my program, we have a whole week on editing, so we literally go through step by step, and I show you exactly how to do it, and you can stop it and go back and follow along and use it until it becomes part of it. But anything like that, it's just the more you do it, the more second nature it's going to become. It's one of those things that it's a step-by-step thing. You can't really mess it up in that way. It's like, it's step-by-step, just do this, then do this, then do this, and don't worry about it so much. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but you've got to get it going. And, you know, your first episode is never going to sound like your 100th episode. It's just not.
Exactly.
So whether you start on your own and go and just, you know, makeshift it the way you think you can, or whether you come to somebody like me who can walk you through the whole process, give you a launch strategy, you know, talk to you about your why, come up with your graphics, work through how you actually come up with ideas, scripting and all of that, and do it with me. You know, as long as you're getting it going and you stick with it, you will always get better.
That's the main thing, definitely. Starting and then just learn as you go on, because that's the best way to build up your experience. So one question with podcasting, obviously it's a great marketing tool. What you obviously have to market your podcast too, and you know, what advice can you give around that then? Because it's not just about, as with everything that you market, you don't just like throw it out there and post it here and there and whatever, but what is most effective, I guess, for podcasting? Because you want to get the right people who understand the purpose of your podcast to go and follow you on the right platform that they might be on, or, you know, kind of become a listener and just start engaging in your podcast. So what would be the best ways to get that going?
So for me, I like to think of your podcast as kind of your top of funnel item. This is the way to get people in. And where are you getting them in from? You're getting them in from social media, you're getting them in from your email list, you're getting them in from groups that you're in, networking events that you go to. You know, these are all of the different spaces that there are people that can listen to your podcast, and your podcast is free. So it's a very easy yes for people, in the fact that they haven't got to put their hand in their pocket to hear it. And one of the things that, you know, this goes back to that whole long tail marketing thing, is that you are bringing people in, and then you want to get them from your podcast onto your email list, so that you can email them every week with, got a new episode. And by doing that, creating this system where your podcast says, hey, sign up for podcast, you know, information, sign up for my newsletter so you don't miss an episode, whatever, that is going to really sort of help build your email list. And in my first year of business, back in 2020, when I looked back on my email list for the previous year, 50% of them had come from my podcast.
Wow.
So 50% of people had either signed up to get podcast notifications, or had signed up for a freebie that I had given out on my podcast. So for me, it's really a case of, you talk about it all the time, talk about it to death, because we know on social media that not everybody sees anything. So, you know, make sure that you are sharing it and sharing it again, and don't stop talking about it. You know, I heard somebody say once that you can't take 20 TikToks and turn them into a podcast episode, but you can take a podcast episode and turn it into 20 TikToks. There is so much repurposing power in your podcast that you could have social media content for days, months, years. Like, it really can, especially if you're doing a weekly episode. You can get so much out of that if you're somebody who goes, oh, I don't know what to post on my social media, post your podcast, you know, post the stats, like the 3 things that you talked about, like 3 points from the podcast in a carousel on Instagram. Do a reel of just like 30 seconds, do a reel of 60 seconds, do a reel of 90 seconds from the podcast of something that was really important to drive people to go and listen to the full episode. You can do that multiple times within one episode and bring people back to it again and again. And that, to me, is the best way to start building that audience, is to be sharing it with them all the time. And it's you know, it's that free thing that you're not selling people, you're asking them to come and listen. And when they come and listen and they've listened enough that they become those loyal listeners, then your podcast is where you can sell to them. But the idea is to get them off of the social, listening to your podcast, and then onto your email list. And if you can get them on your email list, then obviously you've got much more ability to nurture them there on your email list than you do on social media. So that's my preference of how I use it. And I do have my podcast embedded on my website, because I want people to get on my website. I want traffic to my website. So that's where I send people. And on my website, I have links to Google, to Spotify, to Apple. So if they want to go and listen on any of those platforms, they can click those buttons and go over to their platform of choice, but they land on my website. So I always give out my website link rather than go and listen on Apple and give Apple, because that's the other thing, is you don't know where they're listening. Well, you do. If you look at your stats in the back, you know, most of my listeners listen on Apple Podcasts, but if I put out the Apple Podcast link, then my Spotify listeners, they can't listen to that, so it doesn't help them. So I send them to my website, and I send them to my homepage of my podcast website, which has the links to the other apps that they can go to, and that's how I choose to sort of filter them, so that they can sort of stay in my world and move away from social media. My goal is to be able to walk away from social media as this thing that I have to do, this training hamster wheel that I have to be on, to only do it if I enjoy it, or if I've got something to say that I want to put out, and just have my podcast doing the work. Like running ads to your podcast, visibility ads to your podcast is so powerful. I've done that before, and it made such a big difference. I'm no expert on ads, but I've seen other people that just run ads on social media and aren't on social at all other than those ads, and those ads just lead people to their podcast, and I'm like, that is my goal. That's my goal.
Interesting. That is so good. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and all your advice. So last but not least, what does building your business with boundaries mean to you, Donna?
So for me, this is something that I struggle with, and we've spoken about this before, but I am a mum, but my daughter's 22. So she doesn't need me like she used to. She does live here, but you wouldn't believe it half the time because she's barely around. And my partner is a tech guy. He works long hours and he'll come home and he does sort of nudge me every now and then, but he comes home and does the cooking because I gave up on that a long time ago. And so I struggle. My biggest thing is like being in here way late into the evening, and I do most of the time, except right now I'm in a launch, so it's a bit tough, but most of the time when dinner is ready, that is when I walk away from the office and I don't come back in. Right. So that's kind of my boundary, is like dinner time, I'm walking away. And it's really important for me because I could sit here all day. When you're a solo entrepreneur, you are the person doing every single thing in your business. And when you look at a company and look at all the different departments they have and the things that they do, is it any wonder we're sort of exhausted all the time? And, there's always something to do. But my thing is anyone going to die? And if they're not, then it's not that important that I do it right then and there. And trying to prioritize my work is sort of my biggest factor. Is I write down 3 things in the morning that I want to do. These are the things that I've got to get done today, and I do those things. Anything else is a bonus. And if I don't get through those 3 things because they're quite big projects that I've kind of over-egged how long it's going to take me, then I just, tomorrow's another day and I've got more time, and I'm not going to push it because there's no point. There is no point. You have to have that balance. So it is a struggle and a fight for me. And at the weekends, I am often in my office, I have to say. But last weekend, I told you before we got on here, I had an absolute tech disaster last week, and it had me very emotional, very upset on Thursday and Friday. And on Saturday, Sunday, I was like, nope, I am not in the office working. And me and my other half went out for a historical walk of our hometown, which we haven't really gone out in the town in the first place, but on Saturday we happened to look through a book that was all old history photos from just post the Second World War of what our town used to look like. And I was just like, on Sunday I was like, should we go for a walk? And we just literally walked around where all of these pictures were taken and looking at the changes and how different it is. 1 to then, but 2 to sort of the last time I properly went round in the town, because this was the town that I used to bus to when I was a teenager, and I was just like, wow, that was never there, this was never there. And it was really interesting. So trying to remember to take that time and stepping away is really, really important.
Fantastic. And that's the thing, isn't it, with boundaries? You are constantly working at them. It's not something that just, that's it. I have
put it in place once and it sticks. No.
And it's, exactly. It doesn't just stay. It takes some maintenance.
It does.
So thank you so much, Donna. It's been lovely having you. How can people find out more about you? And do you have a freebie that you want to share? I can pop the link in the notes anyway afterwards, but if you want to just tell everybody about it.
Okay, so you can find me on socials, but if you go to donnaeade.com, that is probably the best place. You can find all of my links to everything on there, and you'll find a lot of resources hidden around the website, so do have a little walk around. There's a different freebie on my about page to the one that's on the home page and things like that. So you can access my free masterclass, Understanding the Power of Podcasting. That's available at all times for instant access, and that will be on my website, so you can go there for that. But I'm actually planning my next Podcamp for the end of January. So if you're interested in that, there will be a sign-up link on the website as well for that. And that is the Launch Ready Podcamp. So what I said about making sure you've got a launch strategy in place and launching it like a product, come along to that free Podcamp and you will get your strategy in place. I always like to say that you need to start with the end in mind, and the end of starting a podcast is launching it. So we start with the launch, we get all that, and then we figure out how we actually do a podcast, so that you've got the strategy ready to go. Because if you launch it well, and you launch it with purpose, then it's a bit of a, it's a thing. It's like when you launch a product, if you've ever launched a product or a service or a new package, know the time that takes. So if we get the launch ready, done, before you even start to sort of put episodes together, that strategy is just there, and you can just pull it out as you're working towards getting your episodes recorded, ready for the launch, and you can be running that alongside it without the headache of thinking, what do I do, where do I start, who do I need to talk to?
Yeah.
So that's coming up.
Sounds fantastic, Donna. Sounds fantastic. So do go check out Donna's links. I'll pop them in the description below. So thank you so much, Donna. Thanks for sharing your story and your wisdom. It's been great to have you.
Thank you so much for the invite. It's been great.
Stop going nuts trying to focus on multiple things and achieving nothing. Have you ever felt like the filling in a sandwich, squeezed, stressed, surrounded by pressure, unable to prioritise your business dreams? Now, if you feel overwhelmed and torn between building your business and caring for your loved ones, then your business dreams do not have to come last. I've put together an overwhelm-free weekly action plan for busy business mums. You are simply one action away from a whole new perspective. This is where it all begins to start creating a snowball effect. All you need to do is download my weekly action plan, and the link will be in the comments or the podcast description.